A strong and healthy Mercury in your consciousness will exhibit the traits of Mercury in Virgo, which is the opposite sign of Pisces, where Mercury is debilitated. So Virgo is the zodiac sign or the energetic environment that the mercurial agenda in your consciousness, it's the most compatible with, where Mercury is thriving. So remember that this doesn't mean that if you have Mercury in Virgo, that your Mercury is automatically thriving in how you're expressing Mercury in your consciousness. And that the idea that the expression of each planet is multifaceted and we need to consciously work on them. So it also means that if you don't have Mercury in Virgo, you can still have a great Mercury about you. So a solid and steadily improving Mercury in your consciousness, it's probably the most important tool that you can have to be improving your life overall. Again, if Mercury is in your chart and it's in a poorly placed position in your chart, receiving difficult aspects, this doesn't mean that it's forever going to be in poor shape. But Mercury is this part of us that's finding a way to make life work until it is working. And it's an extremely practical planet. So a strong Mercury, first and foremost, it's the opposite of what we were talking about in the previous video, which is being essentially an airhead or too conceptual and abstract in your thinking and your way of applying what you know into the world and creating a mental world that is very detached from the reality on the ground. So Mercury in Virgo is really the opposite of that kind of mentality. And let's talk about why Mercury is exalted in Virgo. And first, keep in mind that it's the only planet that's exalted in its own sign, which is really interesting. And the way that I read that is that it shows how really self-contained Mercury is, that it's such a dynamic and it's a planet that has so many abilities to it that it can really function in a vacuum, so to say. And you can have other planets helping Mercury, of course, that boosts Mercury. But it's very possible to be using your Mercury all on its own and to be really isolating this part of your consciousness, understanding what it is. And just that alone is going to boost your ability, all these mercurial abilities. It can really work on its own very independently. So essentially, we're using Mercury to figure things out. What's going on in my life, in my relationship, in my career? What's happening? And why are things happening the way that they're happening? What should I do or what should I not do? And being able to go onto this kind of fact-finding mission about examining our life, what's happening around us, what's really going on. So notice I'm not saying I have to do this, this, or this, or I feel I have to do this. Instead, a strong Mercury just wants to know, first and foremost, before making important decisions about things. What's happening? What's going on? I just got to know something, or I just want to see the reality of a situation. And that's why a strong Mercury is always so curious about the world. These people love to learn and they'll follow that information wherever it's going to lead them. So a great use of your Mercury is knowing how to be an objective observer, and that being objective is absolutely necessary if you're really committed to improving your life. If you're lying to yourself or you're lying to other people, eventually that's going to lead you to a whole host of problems. So this aligns very well with Virgo, this idea of being committed to the truth or being committed to an objective reality, because Virgo is an earth sign. And that means that it's a sign that is about the things we can touch and feel, the things that we're sure of, as sure as we could possibly be, this concrete reality. And Mercury, well, it's a very mental planet, very cerebral planet. It rules Gemini, an air sign. But it does so much better in the Virgo earth sign because you're able to use that airiness, those constructs about reality, your mental abilities, and put it into the practical earth world, put it into reality, and not just stuck entertaining ideas and staying in a mental world. You take the next step and you put it into reality. So the very first sign of a very healthy Mercury Virgo person, or a healthy Mercury in your consciousness, is the ability to manifest ideas into the real world. And it's an amazing feeling and realization when you look at something in your life and you see where it began as just an idea in your head. Everything begins as an idea. And it's amazing when you look at buildings and architecture and you see this fabulously made construct, and that began in someone's head, or it began in a group of people's head, and then it became a blueprint, and then it was eventually built. And I had that feeling very strongly when I made my feature film Vedic Nights. And it took me 4 years from the idea in my head to the script, to the casting, the production, the shooting, the editing, all that, 4 years until I had a final finished film, a file on my computer. And it was interesting to see that there was this bridge between something that began in my head and then this final product on the screen. And that bridge was 4 years of work. This process of manifesting something that begins here and eventually becomes the final product. And in this case, a file, just a file on your computer that is the movie. So a strong Mercury has this very intense desire to make something real and to not be afraid to be dealing with the real world and putting these ideas into practice, rather than, again, just sticking to ideas that are in your head and never actually making them real. Some people, they say that they're just waiting for the right moment to actualize and concretize their ideas, but you'll see they're never actually doing it. And they think that one day it'll all just happen and it'll all just manifest itself and become real. And it takes time, it takes trial and error and practice in real life, in the real world, to make your ideas alive. And so don't get caught up in the contemplation or that planning phase and thinking that you have to work everything out in your head before putting it into real life. That's what I see happen, is that people say, oh, I'm one of those persons that I have to work out all the details first. Some people are really good at doing that, but a lot of times these people they actually never get to what they're saying they're going to do, because they don't do little by little and work it out in real life, because things inevitably change as you begin doing something. So make things happen now in some way, shape, or form to get the idea moving into the real world, because it doesn't just happen all at once. And this is one reason why people who say, I have got these great ideas to be a writer, and they want to be a writer, but they're never actually doing any actual writing. They have, say, maybe a great concept and a great story worked out, but they're not actually doing the craft of manifesting the idea. And they never actually finish the book or finish the script, because they're never getting out of their head. Because when you're writing, one of the first things you learn as you're writing is that the ideas begin to morph and change. New ideas come as you're writing. And it's a very fascinating process. And things come about that you didn't expect. And I'm bringing about writing because writing is an extremely mercurial activity. But it goes with most things in life. It's about really doing the process little by little and getting better at that process and becoming more skilled at that process, not waiting for one day things to just form magically and things become real instantly. Ideas strike very quickly, but actually working those ideas out takes time and energy and focus. When you're able to have that cerebral nature of Mercury working to collect ideas, data, information, and then applying it to something useful, then you're a person who's proactively improving your life, because that's a fundamental part of Mercury, making your life better and therefore more enjoyable. Because that's what the purpose of obtaining information is, to make your life more enjoyable so that your time spent on Earth is gradually improving in quality. We don't want our lives to be gradually getting harder and worse. So an exalted Mercury in our consciousness is able to find these practical ways to improve your life through fact-finding and through gathering new information, figuring out how things are working, and specifically in the technicalities of things. So a strong Mercury is really great at details and understanding the minutia of things. They're good. These people generally are good with, obviously with ideas, but good with names, good with places. They're really good at being able to, say, regurgitate or understand the dictionary definitions of things, how things are defined. And then this all leads to kind of building up an encyclopedic knowledge about one thing or about many things. They're able to just gather a lot of information, be able to compartmentalize it in a very objective and straightforward way. And then they're separating their ideas about those things in a different compartment. So these people, what a really good Mercury can be is, you have that phrase, the jack of all trades, but the master of none, which is unfortunate. You're good at a lot of little things, but not great at anything. But a great Mercury person is able to really turn that into a jack of all trades and a master of some. So Mercury is this planet of excellence. And using Mercury properly, it makes you excellent at something. And it's this ability to perfect a talent or improve on any kind of skill set you have. Now, Virgo, it's what we call a tamasic sign, meaning that it's a sign that gives us certain kinds of abilities to remove ourselves from undesirable situations. And it's in the same way that there are the two tamasic planets, Mars and Saturn, which are focused on removing ourselves from undesirable situations, and so that we can spend more time on things that we want to be doing. Mars is dealing with undesirable situations in the form of problems. Saturn deals with undesirable situations in the form of things that we cannot really solve and we just have to deal with and work through over the long term. So the naturally playful and kind of energetic and charismatic Mercury, it's exalted in a sign that's not playful at all. This is a sign that is more about solving practical daily problems in our life, which is really interesting. And this brings us to one of the most impressive kinds of mercurial persons, the kind of Mercury people that I find to be so extremely mercurial and using Mercury at a very high level. And these are investigative journalists. And I talked a little bit about investigative journalists in my video on the friends of the sun, how Mercury is the friend of the sun. But there's this idea that the highest praise an investigative journalist can receive is being murdered by the CIA, which shows the sad state of affairs about how modern day governments work. When you threaten with information powerful people to the extent that it's so true and dangerous that your life becomes a threat. But what are the key characteristics of an investigative journalist that are making them these such major threats to those in power? Why are they doing what they're doing? They are seeing problems in the world and they want to be part of a solution by discovering what's going on and presenting their findings to the public. So this is that tamasic nature I was talking about. When Mercury is in Virgo, the desire to solve problems, seeing a problem and being a part of a solution. And that problem could be something in your daily life. Mercury is good at managing daily problems when it's exalted in Virgo, and in general, being able to get over the humps by being practical and being able to see options. And then extend that out to the bigger picture. These kinds of people are using their Mercury abilities in order to solve problems in the world, like reforming a government, reforming politics, reducing pollution in the world, or just maybe helping in your local community. So these people, they want to be helpful, like how a good friend will help you when you're in need. It's not just someone you hang out with from time to time. You're helpful to one another. You want to help the other person solve a problem if they have a problem. So a strong Mercury has this motivation to be beneficial to other people. And that is one of the core motivations of investigative journalists. Firstly, they assess information from an entirely objective standpoint, which means that they're not supposed to be taking political sides as they're investigating. They just follow information, they follow the money, and they do their best to come to a cold, standardized assessment and eventually conclusion about what's happening in the world, what's going on, this mercurial preoccupation. What is it that is happening around me? So to back up just for a second, Virgo's location in the world, symbolically and physically, is the mountain peak, the top of a mountain, which is different from Aries, which is the mountain itself, the entire mountain and the rocky terrain of the mountain. And it's said that in order to purify your body, you go to the ocean. To purify your mind, you go to the mountaintops, and to purify your soul, you go to the desert. So if we're on the mountain peak of Virgo, our mind becomes clear and we're able to see things as they are and to free ourselves from false ideas and false impressions. And there's this incredible freedom in that, to be able to see the world around us clearly, to clear the mind. So Virgo, what this is showing us is that Virgo is the sign of purity. Just like its other symbol of the prepubescent girl, the pure girl, and Virgo, of course, means virgin. So the purity of not having any sexual relations. It's the sign that signifies purity. I'm going to return to the investigative journalist example in a second. But what this is showing us is that when Mercury is exalted, when you're embodying this exalted Mercury in yourself, you're able to arrive at pure ideas and conclusions. Things are either true or they're not true. And not to confuse us with that deep spiritual idea of it's all true, which I discussed in the first video on Mercury. But this is a very optimal way of using your Mercury, to begin to see the facts in the world around you in as pure form and from as pure of a standpoint as possible, and to not insert your own twist on things unnecessarily. That's when you come to speculation, which speculation is very fun and valuable when you're putting patterns together. But separating your bias and your speculation from the information itself is absolutely critical and essential while using your Mercury. So you see these really strong mercurial people, they say, okay, well, I'm speculating here, or they're going to begin a new sentence and say, okay, well, this is speculation, but this, and this. So you see that these people are really working to distinguish between the reality, the truth about something, and untruths, and also between what they are hypothesizing something about. It may not be true, but they're really being clear that what they're saying may not be true, but they're working to say, well, this I know is true. So this is the information, the pure information I've gathered. This is my speculation on it. These are very strong mercurial people that are using their Mercury in a very sincere way and genuine way. And they are actually taking that effort to separate what's pure and, you could say, impure. And there are so many new terms that are being created, such as misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, deep fakes, cheap fakes. And all of these terms are very confusing. And I think they're meant to confuse because they revolve around the speculating about the intention of the person communicating the information. But at the end of the day, something is either true or untrue. Did this person receive money illegally? Did they break the law according to what the law says? Did they know or did they not know? An investigative journalist and a strong Mercury person is only concerned if something is true or not. And the motivations for why something happened or how something went down, that can be sorted out later. Because, of course, motivation is an important factor when it comes to information. Why did a person commit the crime? But first and foremost, was the crime committed? And so being able to separate out interests of people in question, conflicts of interest, etc. These are all factors at play. But first and foremost, did something happen, or did this or that person say this or that? The facts of the case, so to say. So the biggest enemy of journalism is bias, political bias, financial bias. And it's why so many newspapers are struggling. It's because people only want to read or listen to things that confirm their bias. And what that does, it leaves out a mass portion of the population who has a different political bias or social bias. But a critical reason for all of this, it's that it's getting harder and harder just to know the straight facts from one of these journalistic institutions about what is happening without interpretation, or even worse, omitting information that can be contrary to the bias. And if you've ever worked in a journalistic context or worked with the news, I used to be an opinions columnist, and I worked in the newspaper at the University of Illinois. And you start working with other journalists, one thing you realize is that the omission of information, what you don't tell people, it's even stronger than what you do tell people, because you're really choosing what is important. And it's one of the essential notions of what is a journalist. What does a journalist do? They report information that's true, and they make the judgment, is this information important to the public interest? So if they decide that it's not, they're omitting information that other people might see as that was important. So there is this kind of aspect of interpreting whether to communicate something or not. And there's a great power in that. Nowadays, trust in mainstream journalism, it's lower than people's trust in members of Congress. And almost no people under the age of 30 really believe what the news is saying, especially the mainstream news networks on TV. And why is that? Because they're so wrapped up in the intentions of who's giving information rather than the information itself. This is a very confused Mercury. Mercury that's it's not able to separate out these things that I'm saying. So for example, I think it was the Washington Post and the New York Times, or one of those two, they made a new rule to their journalists. And that new rule was that they were not going to publish any information that came from another country that hacked another entity, another person, or another institution. So now they're not going to give people any information that fits that criteria. A foreign government electronically hacked or got information in a kind of an underhanded way. The problem with that is that what if the information is true? Yeah, the information was found in a way such as through a computer hack, but then just saying that information, we're not going to print it, even though it could be a bombshell report. So a strong Mercury doesn't care about who says what or how a person got to know something, but whether that something is real or not, or it could be somewhere in the middle. It can have partial truth to it, partial falsehoods to it. They're going to examine information in a very detailed way and leave out that personal bias to the best of their ability. So a hugely important part of a strong Mercury is being able to adjust yourself to new information and not leave out inconvenient information to your thesis about what's happening in your life. So what separates a journalist that works in a major media corporation from these independent investigative journalists is that the investigative journalist does their best to leave bias at the door, to follow a trail and to see where it leads, which is going to upset people naturally. But they're opening doors, seeing what's behind the doors, even if those facts, that a different, maybe harsher reality, it's not what you expected or contradicted something that you thought you used to know. So in a different example, a more practical example, say you've been told by your parents or your family or culture for your entire life that the only way or the best way to have a happy and enjoyable life is to make as much money as possible. So that idea, it's raw information that you receive that is meant to steer you in a direction in your life, to make your life work for you. It's an option to make as much money as possible in order to be happy. And so that's what Mercury is doing. It wants to find the best option to make life enjoyable, to learn how to play the game of life so that your life is more functional, your life is getting better. Then say you discover that no matter how much money you make, you still find yourself getting more and more depressed. So the information you've learned on your journey in your life is now contradicting what you were taught. You have a choice now. Do I adjust myself to the new information that I gained in living my life, that money is not the only source of a happy life? Or do you stay on that same trajectory, more and more beating your head against the wall, trying to figure out if that idea is going to work, even though the evidence gives the contrary, and the expected result is different? Do you still keep going on that path? So this shows us that a strong Mercury person, in any way in life, when you receive information and that information is told to you to be correct or factual, a strong Mercury is able to very simply change their mind based on new information that you learn, either from investigating the world around you through your experiences or someone telling you something that may be different. And I really harp on this point because it's something that we're seeing is a bigger and bigger problem in the world in general. People get so dug into their position about how life is or isn't, or what the facts are or aren't. This candidate is this or that, why this or that is the only way something can work, and just fighting about all of the facts, not having certain ones, not having other ones, these people, et cetera, et cetera. So a healthy, light, playful, and strong Mercury within you, it's not entrenching itself into the facts about the world and get so deeply invested into certain ideas, or to really tie your identity to information itself while ignoring other information, subconsciously or consciously ignoring other information. And so Virgo, Mercury's exalted sign, has this reputation for creating very dry and calculating people. These people are very precise, they're very diligent, they're very meticulous, especially when there's a heavy emphasis on Virgo in the chart, when you have multiple planets in Virgo, or if the ascendant's in Virgo, etc. So why would these qualities, this meticulousness and this precision and, like I said, dryness, kind of cold, factual kind of personality, why are those so helpful to Mercury? A strong and healthy Mercury in our consciousness takes on this attitude of it is what it is. And it does not become emotionally involved with information to an excessive degree. And this is a big topic we're going to talk about in the following video about how the moon affects Mercury, Mercury's enemy, the moon. So essentially, a strong Mercury is able to be content and relaxed and oftentimes even neutral about the world around them because they're not overly identifying themselves with the facts on the ground. And this gives that mathematical aspect of Mercury. People who have a really good Mercury, especially Mercury and Virgo, they're very mathematical. And math isn't opinionated, it's true or false. And the approach of it is what it is, you can be passionate about things in your life, passionate about information, doing your best. And if things don't go in your favor, okay, that's fine. If things do go in your favor, that's great. You can always work on making things better in the future. But that attitude of it is what it is, it's this being able to cultivate this ability to have this equilibrium and balance that gives this emotional detachment from the world, and which ends up serving you because you can have a cleaner and more accurate view of what's going on around you. You're not so invested in something to be true or not. You have a nice, healthy detachment from the information itself. It is what it is. So an exalted Mercury, it doesn't get hung up on things in the way that a person will become extremely bothered if something doesn't go their way, and examine every single detail about what went wrong and why they see themselves as a failure. Instead, examine what went wrong and make proper adjustments, and the trial and error process gradually improves. And eventually you can just be factual about what went wrong and keep moving forward. But you're not overly invested in the failure of something to happen or the failure of a certain option that you wanted to work. So the idea of Mercury, very strong Mercury people, and especially with Virgo, these being kind of simplistic kind of thinkers, not simplistic. They're not just math detached from emotions completely like that. They're actually very complex thinkers, and they do very well at combining many factors at one time and be able to examine many things working in a space simultaneously. And these people, they can be very introverted because they spend so much time in their head. And people with very highly functioning Mercuries, you'll see them be that kind of mechanical and impersonal kind of person, which it oftentimes turns other people off because maybe on the surface they're not as likable or they're not as charismatic. But underneath, these people are very, very consumed in a positive way in their mental world. And they're able to use this ability to be precise and use that in order to make sense of the external world in a very productive way and in a way that helps bring stability to their life. So you're not going to see people with healthy Mercuries surrounded by unpredictable events in their life or surrounded by unstable situations because they're balancing all of these factors at play and they're managing their life very well. Mercury is the manager in our consciousness. So this kind of goes against that reputation of Mercury to being this planet of fun, of friendship, of acting, of charisma, of being able to kind of float their way through the world and have this, kind of unending playfulness and curiosity to them, which these are all positive things that Mercury is. But the exalted Mercury mentality, it's almost boring to people on the outside when you have an exalted Mercury. And these people they have excellent Mercuries, but how could it be Mercury that's doing so well when they're so boring? Well, these people have figured out a way to make their life work in a very stable and logical and realistic way. They're managing their life extremely well. And they're really not consumed by drama and what people say are interesting people. And my dad told me a funny story. He watched a documentary about Pink Floyd, and because Pink Floyd is this really psychedelic band, and they have these really deep lyrics and profound music, and they're just an amazing band. And there's this guy who was going to go interview them, and he thought, this is going to be the most wild journey I'm ever going to take to meet these artists who created this music. And at the end, he was saying, that was the most boring band I've ever seen in my whole life. They were just totally underwhelming. Well, what you have is an excellently managed and formed band. They're able to put out excellent things, a quality product, their music, really profound music, but they're not in this wildly dramatic, interesting, or kind of extravagant kind of lifestyle. They're just kind of regular people that do what they do on a high level. They create a stable world around them. And that is what a really good Mercury is able to do. And it comes off as boring to many people. Because of course we have that archetype of the most interesting man in the world. It was a Dos Equis commercial, or the Renaissance man or the Renaissance woman. That is a very mercurial kind of person. And it also indicates a strong Mercury because these people are so endlessly curious about the world. They have all of these skills and talents, and they're able to materialize or manifest those interests in the world that are improving their lives or improving other people's lives, or they're satisfying their thirst for adventure. So this, being a person like that, it's a sign of a strong and healthy Mercury, but that's the Gemini side of Mercury, the air sign, the communication side, the kind of more adventurous side. But I lean towards the Virgo Mercury as being a better Mercury and being a stronger Mercury in general than, say, the Renaissance man type of Mercury, because the tendency of the Renaissance man type of person, they are so extremely changeable and they end up jumping around a little bit too much. That kind of romantic lifestyle kind of a person where it seems like they have the most interesting life ever. That must be a better life. They have this extreme curiosity and maybe they're charismatic and they're deeply fascinated about the world. And these people are like that. But the problem with these people is that they can very easily fall into impatience or have this lack of follow through and the ability to really finish something that they've started. And the end result of that is the jack of all trades and master of none. And they lead very interesting lives, but in the end, they're not really accomplishing much personally for themselves, and they're not really feeling like their life is getting better from where it started. And what happens is that these people struggle to have an inner satisfaction about their accomplishments because they're not sticking to one thing completely and thoroughly, or say a set of things very, very thoroughly. They're not digging deep into it and really going as far as they can on that single thing. They're too dispersed in their interests. Mercury is what we're interested in. And there's too many of things flying around at once. On the outset, they seem really interesting, but they become a bit too scattered as time goes on. So I experienced this myself when I was living the bohemian lifestyle in Brooklyn, in New York. So I was painting, I was working as a fashion photographer, I was making collages, I was making music, EPs and albums. I had 2 part-time jobs. I was writing short plays, I was assisting in plays and in the theater, and all while trying to have a social life and a romantic life. And I was so passionate about all these things. I wanted to do all of these different things. But at a certain point, my partner at the time, I said to her, I got to do these collages. And she kind of snapped and said, just stop doing those. Because if I was going to have any kind of real success at these collages, I was going to have to basically dedicate all my time to doing that alone. And she said she knows these collage artists and they're 100% that is what they do, or they do it in conjunction with painting or the plastic arts. And that is their own thing. And these collages was just one of the many things that I was doing. So I was initially kind of offended, or I was initially, wow, like that was kind of a harsh thing to say, and I felt defeated. But obviously she was right, and it didn't take me long to realize, yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous. Why do I have to do this? No one's commissioning me to do that. But I felt like I just need to do it because I'm interested. I like to do it. So I had to suck it up and realize that I was stretching myself extremely thin, and I needed to pick something and focus on that something. And this is the kind of Gemini Mercury I'm talking about. Yeah, they can be very interesting, have all of these things going on, but at the end of the day, they aren't really, they're not moving forward with their life in a very tangible way. And it's because of a lack of a single dedication to a single path and doing a single thing extremely well. And instead of trying to do a million different little things and trying to pick and choose between all of them. And what I ended up doing is it took me time, but I eventually honed it and said, okay, I have to choose what I'm going to do. What that's going to be is theater. It's going to be theater. And then it kind of morphed into theater and film, but the directing aspect of what I went to school for, what I was most passionate about, and really remove all of these other excess hobbies that I was doing. So the healthier the Mercury is, the more the person is able to find a proper balance. and they're able to concentrate their efforts on something and slowly get better at that something over time. You'll see really accomplished people thriving and using their Mercury to manage their life really well in a very balanced way. And then from the outset, they look like they're really boring people. And the reason they seem boring, or they seem really kind of mundane and everyday people, but they're very successful at certain things, and you won't see them in the news, but they're very good at something. It's because these people are extremely passionate about the work itself, and they are constantly curious about that chosen field that they're in and what they find interesting to them. And that single thing, that mental stimulus, is enough for them to keep them going. So all of these other factors in their life are going fine. They're able to manage them. And they might even seem kind of just mundane or regular people. But inside they have that single fire, that single pure curiosity to do and work at something for the long term and really concentrate on a single thing and get really good at that. And Virgo, it's also really well known about Virgo people, and it's a stereotype of them. It's a very hardworking sign. And a very strong Mercury in a person's consciousness, what they do is that they love the work itself, and they're not preoccupied with the results of the work or the outcomes that I was talking about. So for a strong Mercury, what happens when you have a strong Mercury and you're working at something really well, the reward for that work is more work. And that more work is work that you love to do. And eventually that more work becomes higher level work. So the more that you do, the actual reward is being able to do that more. And that gives its own satisfaction in yourself when it's something you love to do, what your Mercury is absolutely interested and curious about mastering over time. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that the only thing we're guaranteed in life is work, not the results or the fruits of the work, as he says. And people associate Saturn with hard work, and Saturn plays a part in hard work, but it's really Mercury within us that is finding something in life that is insatiably interesting and pursuing that thing until the end. And that end may never come, but it's that journey of discovery. That is the food for the Mercury in our consciousness. So I'll end on the idea that I like to think about strong Mercury, strong Virgo mentality, is that I also see libraries as a very Mercury/Virgo location. Of course, it's a very Mercury location, but I also associate Virgo with libraries. And why is that? Because you have all the knowledge of the world right at your fingertips. And you have these dusty archives that you can investigate forever. And it's a very meticulously organized place. So a strong Mercury in a person has this ability to really organize thoughts, organize your world, organize your, compartmentalize the things that you're interested in, and then have this keep feeling fascination, like the song, keep feeling fascination about the world around you, and relishing in these unlimited possibilities and on the options of the things that you can learn, and how you can continually educate yourself about things, while at the same time not being overwhelmed by it. You don't have to read every book in the library, but you know that there's a book in here that you can read today that's going to blow your mind or open you up to something brand new that you didn't know before. So this is one of the reasons why people with good Mercuries, they love to study astrology, because you see when you start to learn astrology and you really become passionate about it, it's endless. It's this endless spiritual science. And it stretches all the way back into ancient history. And there's so many ways of doing astrology that have been done in the past. There are all these techniques. And it's also fun to learn all of these things and then start practicing it as you get better at it, applying astrology. So I met this really amazing astrologer. She is the president of the American College of Vedic Astrology, Charlotte Benson. And she did a lecture in New York once, and I met her. She's really interesting and really nice lady. And she said she went to an astrologer in India, and that astrologer said that she said he drew her chart in the dirt or something. And he looked at a chart and he said, you must be a well-known astrologer, and this is your 5th lifetime of studying astrology. I just thought that was so interesting. Whether that astrologer was correct or not, I believe that it's very possible that people who are super into astrology, they've been doing this for many lives because it's so endless. You can just keep going and keep going. So people with strong Mercuries that have that endless curiosity about learning about astrology. And what separates a mediocre Mercury from a strong Mercury is to be able to apply those abilities, like I said, to help other people understand themselves, or able to use the information to help yourself. So in any pursuit of any kind of knowledge or anything that you're interested in, you can't just stay in the research phase. Strong Mercuries are very good at research. Studying in the library. Have a very scientific mentality where they love to study. The key is to get out of the mental world and to externalize and materialize your knowledge base. And that is Mercury as the manifester. Manifest what you love and what you're interested in and make it useful. That's the highest level of what Mercury can do to improve your life. That's the urge of Mercury within us to apply the applied knowledge aspect of it. And little by little, through the mercurial process, the gradual adjustments, choosing the right options, following through, life gets better and life gets more enjoyable over time.